Jacob Hornberger, president of the Future of Freedom Foundation, and welcome to this week's Trump Watch. Well, as y'all know, almost the entire conversation in the political world, the Washington, D.C. world, continues to be on the Jeffrey Epstein scandal. And so I want to continue to address that scandal, but specifically the role that this woman who was an associate of Jeffrey Epstein, Ghislaine Maxwell, and her role in this, and why all of a sudden she's popping up, and what significance could all this have to the whole Jeffrey Epstein scandal. So I want to focus on her in this segment of Trump Watch. But before we get there, let me first talk about the mainstream press and the Jeffrey Epstein scandal, because I find it quite humorous. That what they're doing in the mainstream press, from what I can gather, just by and large, is they're poking fun at this supposed conspiracy theory. Okay, that's the thrust of virtually all their articles. That, President Trump's the victim of of his own conspiracy theories, and yuck, 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 the Republicans are paying a price for conspiracy theories, and they all go off on this conspiracy theory angle. But the reason I find that humorous is because I never see them demanding that Trump release the records. I mean, what's up with that? I mean, my question, of course, is why doesn't Trump just release the records? What's the big deal? Just release the records. He campaigned on transparency, on draining the swamp, and bringing light to all these dark side secrets of the deep state. I mean, so what's the big deal? Just release the records. Why doesn't he just release the records? Well, equally important, why doesn't the press, the mainstream press, demand that he do so? I mean, imagine if just in unison all the newspapers in America, the mainstream press, had editorials, release the records, release the records. Okay, they can still go off on their, conspiracy theory poking fun at, but at the same time they could say, Mr. President, just release the records, just release them all. They're not doing that, which I find very, very interesting and very revealing. Now, as I made clear in the previous segment of Trump Watch, it's my opinion that the national security state is involved in this thing. It's the only rational explanation, in my opinion, as to why Jeffrey Epstein was given this super sweetheart deal. I never have heard of a plea bargain like he got. I mean, he was looking at life in prison for his pedophilia activities with all these young girls in the federal jurisdiction. And the feds agree to a plea bargain by letting him plead guilty to state officials, not federal officials, state officials. And they enter an agreement with him that involves indirectly Ghislaine Maxwell, which we'll get to in a minute. But it was like incredible. And how do they explain this? Well, for me, the best explanation, this is just my opinion, is that Epstein's got a relationship with the deep state, either the national security state of Israel, the Mossad, or the CIA, or both, because it's too much of a sweetheart deal. I mean, this guy gets a 13-month sentence, something like that where he serves it in a county jail instead of a state penitentiary, and they let him out every day. So his sentence really is just spend the night in the county jail for 13 months or whatever. I mean, for engaging in all of these, horrific sexual relations with underage girls. I mean, a standard person that gets caught doing that, I will guarantee you he's looking at a minimum of 20 years in the penitentiary. Minimum. But this guy had several underage girls. He was looking at life in prison. So that's power. I mean, that is real power. It could involve some big donors or big, well-heeled, wealthy politicians or multimillionaires, but I don't think so. That kind of power is, in my opinion, national security state power. So that's my thesis. And if that's the case, and if the mainstream press is sensing that also, then it stands to reason they're not going to do anything that's going to buck the national security state. They will defer to the national security state. And I think that, in my opinion, is a rational explanation as to why the mainstream press isn't demanding in unison, release the records, because they themselves sense that this could be involving the national security state. Now, I'm sure what they would say is, Jacob, well, that's just another conspiracy theory that we're deferring to the national security state. Well, yeah, in a way it is, but by the same token, let's not forget Operation Mockingbird. Now, that, I'm sure some of them would say, well, that was a conspiracy theory too, Jacob, but it really wasn't. It's a conspiracy fact. I mean, as I stated in one of my blog posts this last week, there are conspiracies on the part of the national security state, dark side conspiracies like MK Ultra and destruction of MK Ultra records, and these are dark side stuff that take place. So there are some dark side stuff, things that take place, and Operation Mockingbird was one of them. But of course, the mainstream press doesn't consider it a dark side thing. What had happened was that the CIA wanted to get assets in the mainstream press so they could use their assets to promote their point of view to the American people. It's sort of like propaganda and indoctrination, but not letting people know that it's the CIA behind the propaganda and the indoctrination. So they went to like op-ed writers and commentators saying, this is during the Cold War and the anti-communist crusade, where the Russians were coming to get us and communists were everywhere, including you under your bed and so forth. And they said, would you help us defeat the communists? And we would like to make you an unofficial asset of the CIA. Well, the mainstream press, oh my gosh, this is a big honor. I mean, the CIA, they still consider it a big honor. They don't see the CIA the way we libertarians see it, as a dark side force, as a rot, as a cancer at the center of the U.S. government. They see it as a tremendous honor. The CIA protects us, Jacob, from the Reds and the terrorists and so forth. And so a lot of them leaped at it. Said, you mean I can be a secret agent? Yeah. Oh, yep, sign me up. And so they became assets of the deep state. And so their commentaries and their op-eds would reflect the official CIA perspective. Now, let me give you a good example of this, because when you see the mainstream press poking fun at this Epstein scandal by saying, oh, conspiracy theory, Jacob, it's more conspiracy theory, they almost always combine the JFK assassination with their analysis. They just sort of lump it all together. JFK assassination, Epstein scandal, landing on the moon, they put two or three other ones that are somewhat ridiculous, sort of so that you can kind of get the sense that they're putting it all together as just one crazy, ludicrous conspiracy theory, without thinking that maybe there's validity to this one and not to this one. But let me give you an example of this Operation Mockingbird phenomenon with respect to the JFK assassination. That, as y'all may know, within a couple of hours or an hour after the president was declared dead at Parkland Hospital in Dallas, two of the treating physicians had a press conference where they said that President Kennedy had an entry wound in his throat. And so, of course, that was contrary to what would become the official version, the official narrative of the lone nut assassin, the lone nut theory of the assassination, where only a lone nut was firing from the rear and nobody else was firing, and even though he didn't have any motive, that was it, case closed. But they still had to figure out what to do with this entry wound that the two treating physicians had talked about. So, Life magazine, which was the most popular magazine in America at that time, they published an op-ed by one of their columnists, a guy named Paul Mandel, who was a renowned columnist. This guy was very, very prominent, where he says in this op-ed that the Zapruder film, the film of the assassination that had been taken by Abraham Zapruder. I've got this all detailed in my book, An Encounter with Evil, the Abraham Zapruder story, which I would invite you to buy and read. It includes this account where Mandel writes this op-ed that Life magazine publishes. It says, well, the Zapruder film reflects President Kennedy turning around in the limousine and facing the school book depository when the shot rings out and hits him in the throat. Okay. And Life magazine publishes this. Well, there was one big problem with this, as people later discovered. President Kennedy didn't turn around. I mean, the Zapruder film showed no such thing. It was just a flat-out lie. Now, my own personal hunch, and I put this in my book, is I don't think that Mandel was aware of the lie. I think what happened was that his superiors at Life magazine said, this is what the film shows. We can't let you see it, but it's top secret, because the publisher of Life magazine, a guy named C.D. Jackson, he decided that after they bought the Zapruder film from Abraham Zapruder and the copies that had been made, that he would not show it to the public. Life magazine would not show it to the public because it had too much violence in it. They wanted to protect the American people from the violence. Well, as people later discovered, Mandel's thesis was a lie. And it couldn't be an honest mistake, because, the film doesn't even show him remotely moving in the opposite direction to face the school book depository. Well, it turns out that C.D. Jackson, the publisher, was a real close ally of the CIA. He's essentially an asset of the CIA. And the owner of Life magazine, Henry Luce, was also closely aligned with the CIA. And so this is the type of thing. Now, of course, the mainstream press would say conspiracy theory, Jacob, but these are facts. I mean, these are just facts. This is how Operation Mockingbird worked. That people would do these kind of things on behalf of the CIA. Well, so the Operation Mockingbird was discovered and revealed, and people think, oh, well, it just stopped at that point. Jacob, why would it stop? Nobody got disciplined. Nobody got fired. Nobody got fined. Nobody got imprisoned. Nothing happened. And so, okay, a little embarrassing for the CIA and maybe for some of the assets. Then people discovered that they were like assets of the CIA. But my hunch is that they just kept going and started influencing publishers and owners and acquiring assets there. Or just the power of the deep state. That the mainstream press has learned that on the Kennedy assassination, you just don't touch it. Just don't touch it, especially the fraudulent autopsy. So my hunch is that that's what's going on here. I know that's a digression, but I do find it interesting that the mainstream press is not talking about the demanding that the Epstein records be released by President Trump. All right, let me digress one more minute. I also find it interesting that whenever they're talking about these conspiracy theories, they never bring up the theory that Donald Trump was an agent of the Russians. Remember that one? I mean, we've been on for a whole year hearing Robert Mueller, he's going to save us, Jacob. He's going to save us. For a year, all I heard was Robert Mueller's going to save us from President Trump, who was supposedly a Manchurian candidate of the Russians, and he was going to do the Russian bidding, and the Russians were going to take us over. And then Robert Mueller's report comes out and says, well, there's really no evidence of this. And I mean, but they never bring that is a fascinating conspiracy theory that President Trump was an agent of the Russians, but interestingly enough, they never bring that one up. Okay, let's go to Ghislaine Maxwell. So when they entered into this plea deal with Epstein, they had a non-prosecution agreement. That's what it's called. And in this agreement, they give Epstein immunity, essentially. They promise not to prosecute him for any other crimes, related crimes here with pedophilia there in that district of Florida, the federal district in Florida. And they also, interestingly enough, said that they were promising not to prosecute unindicted co-conspirators. Okay, so there's co-conspirators they're acknowledging in this agreement that are conspiring with with Epstein to commit this pedophilia or trafficking underage girls for purposes of sexual relations and so forth. And they say that these conspirators include, but are not limited to, 4 named women in that agreement. And they name them women, but interestingly enough, Ghislaine Maxwell's not one of the women there. Now, they had to know about Maxwell. I mean, she was there. She was this partner with Epstein, and she was facilitating some of his wrongdoing. And she got convicted of it later. But interestingly enough, they don't name her. But when they indicted her in New York, 2 or 3 years ago for these things, she brought up this agreement and said, I'm covered by this agreement because it says co-conspirators, including but not limited to these 4 women. And she says, okay, I'm the one of the ones that are included, but I'm not named. Well, the Court of Appeals, she got convicted and she appealed her conviction. And one of the points she was raising was this point on appeal. And the court said, no, that's just too nebulous. We're not going to hold that you were covered. And anyway, that agreement applied only to crimes committed in that district in Florida, not other federal districts. And I don't know whether that was a screw up on the part of Epstein's lawyer or whether that was by plan, that the feds only would limit it, a non-prosecution agreement to one district, the Florida district. But whatever. I mean, when they indicted him in New York, their position was that agreement, the federal position was that agreement doesn't bind us in New York. It only binds the U.S. attorney there in that district in Florida. So the court held that she wouldn't be covered anyway. And then they said also that her crimes that she got convicted of lay outside this agreement anyway. So they've upheld her conviction. All right, but there's no question but that she has real knowledge of what was going on here. I mean, if I'm right and the deep state was involved, you would think that she would know it, if not personally by being involved with any meetings that Epstein was involved with the Mossad or the CIA or whatever, but that he might have confided in her that this is what's going on. They obviously had a very close relationship. And so to me, there's a good possibility that he talked to her and revealed these things. And also if there's other people involved in the pedophilia, prominent people, influential people, politicians, millionaires, if there was this blackmail scheme going on, she'd be aware of it. And obviously there'd be a lot of people scared about her testimony. Now, at her trial, she didn't testify, interestingly enough. She said, I don't think they've proven my guilt beyond a reasonable doubt, and so I don't need to testify. Well, apparently she was wrong on that, obviously she was wrong because the jury found her guilty. And she got this 20-year sentence, and I don't know how long she's been in prison, but I think maybe a couple years or so. And so she's still facing another 18 years, which obviously is not a very attractive thing. So I feel fairly confident that while a lot of people want justice, full justice, let the chips fall where they may in the Jeffrey Epstein scandal, my hunch is that Ghislaine Maxwell is not one of those who want justice. She wants freedom. And my hunch is that she is not interested in spending the next 20 years of her life in prison. So how does she get out? Well, she's got one last shot with an appeal to the U.S. Supreme Court because a 3-judge panel rejected her appeal. And then she applied for a rehearing en banc before the whole court of appeals. They denied that. And so she's appealing to the U.S. Supreme Court on, I suppose it's a petition for writ of certiorari, which is what people do in criminal cases. They ask the court to hear their appeal, and the Supreme Court hears a minuscule amount of appeals. So my hunch is that she has a very tiny chance of getting her appeal heard by the Supreme Court and then her conviction overturned. But if she does have knowledge of like if there is a deep state here and she has knowledge of it, she clearly has some leverage here. Because if that's the case, clearly the deep state, the Mossad, the CIA would like to keep that secret. Now, I think it's pretty obvious that if they took her out there in prison, there'd be a lot of suspicious people. But she is smart enough to realize that she's got leverage here. And if I were her, what I would do, and she's a smart woman, I think she would have done this. If she really does have knowledge that provides leverage, knowledge of people or the deep state or whatever, I think the smart thing for her to do as an insurance policy is to write up a statement on this and then make a few copies and put one in her lawyer's hands and then several others in some close trusted friends, and with instructions that if she happens to meet a strange, untimely early death, like suicide, that they are instructed to immediately post this statement on the internet. And then she would let people know within the powers that be that she's done this. And so that would be an insurance policy. Don't take my life if you want to preserve your secret. And that would put the deep state in a position of having to keep her alive so that they could keep preserving their secret. So the Justice Department suddenly out of the clear blue announced last week, oh, well, we're going to go visit her. We're going to interview her. It's like, well, this is really stunning because I've practiced law for 12 years. I know they can't do that when she's got a lawyer. And so how's that possible? They're just going to go up and talk to her? I don't think so. They have to go through her lawyer. So how did that meeting get arranged? And they ended up talking to her for, I don't know, all day or 2 days or something like that. And that supposedly she talked the whole time, was freely talked. And what did she say? Well, nobody knows all that secret too. But I'm almost certain, her lawyer had to be present during that entire time. And so I asked myself, did her lawyer contact the Justice Department and say, hey, she'd like to talk to you? Because if she wants freedom, and I have no doubt she does, I think she realizes the only way she can do that, assuming the Supreme Court denies her appeal, which means the case is over. Her 20 years is now intact in jail. Her only chance is a pardon or a commutation of sentence. And so my hunch is that that's what this meeting's all about, is to say, hey, can you guys get me a pardon or a commutation of sentence? Well, if that's what she wants, obviously it would not be in her interest to say anything bad about the deep state. If the deep state really was involved in this, and if she really had knowledge of this, she would want to keep that secret. Because if she's calling him over, or if she's having this long conversation to say, okay, here's the truth, this was a deep state operation that Epstein was involved with, they're not going to pardon her for that. I mean, she'll be out of jail going on every talk show in America talking about the deep state. So they have leverage too. You see, the feds have leverage. The deep state has leverage. They got a 20-year sentence for this woman. So it's kind of like a dance on these kind of plea bargains. How do you please everybody? And seems to me that if she really does have knowledge of deep state involvement, she would have to figure out a way to communicate, okay, my official position is that there was no deep state involvement. But I've got these statements out there planted around different parts that might be released if the situation calls for it. So if her official position in these interviews or whatever is, and they recorded and all, that there was no deep state, then it's perfect for a pardon. She says, okay, we're going to pardon her because 20 years is too much and so forth. She in turn says it was only Epstein, nobody else, that was it. She gets the pardon, the commutation, she's out. She has no interest at that point of revealing what we're saying hypothetically is the truth, that there really was deep state involvement. Because if she does, I mean, she runs the risk of them retaliating against her big time. And the deep state, remember, they have the power of assassination, including on American citizens. So there's that dance going on. I find it fascinating from a legal standpoint how this thing's going to turn out. Is President Trump going to grant her a pardon? Is he going to commute her sentence? When they asked him about this, he didn't say flat out no. And all of a sudden, all this calling the Justice Department over to talk to Ghislaine Maxwell, absolutely fascinating. So we'll see how that turns out. Let me talk a little bit about the war on immigrants here at the end of Trump Watch. The mainstream press is reporting that the Venezuelan Little League has been denied entry into the United States. That they were the ones that won the top position in Latin American Little League competitions to come to the United States and compete in the big Little League tournament. But they were denied visas. Now, it's not real clear why they were denied visas. Maybe they had tattoos on them. Not sure. I mean, these are Little League, so it'd be unlikely they'd have tattoos. But you never know. I mean, if they got tattoos or members of the Trinidad Agua gang, it's always possible that they've been recruited to be in these gangs. But, I mean, the least thing is that we ought to feel safe. I mean, ICE and the whole immigration service is keeping us safe. I mean, keeping these Little Leaguers out. I mean, you never know. I mean, these could be hardened criminals that are invading the United States under the ruse of competing in Little League. So we ought to be grateful that they're keeping us safe and secure with their immigration police state. And then another aspect of this immigration war that I've kind of find amusing is that a lot of people on the left are shedding crocodile tears over all the suffering that these deportations are causing. I mean, it's finally hitting them that it's not just the hardened criminals, that they're deporting. They're deporting everybody they can grab. They got quotas, and they're grabbing everybody, and tremendous suffering. I mean, people, whose spouse is back at home with the kids, and then all of a sudden she learns her husband's being deported. What does she do? And what if the kids are American citizens and all they're doing is just working for a living with employers that want to hire them? I mean, that's the real bizarre thing in all this. But the left is over there crying these crocodile tears, but they never, ever give the solution to all this. And as I've said before, and as I point out in my new upcoming book, that the case for free trade, the case for open borders, a primer. That's the title of my new book. It should be out in the next, month or so. It'll be a Kindle book, selling for $1 or 99 cents exactly. I point out there that there's only one solution. I've said this for 35 years to this kind of suffering that is inflicted on people with the immigration police state. And it's not reform. It's the only solution is open borders. Just get rid of government restrictions. The same type of open borders we have domestically. It's the only solution. This is what the left doesn't understand. They want the immigration control system and the police state that comes with it, but they want it to be benign. They want it to be nice. They don't understand that if you're going to have this system, you have to have what Trump's doing. Trump's proving what needs to be done to enforce this system. Because if you just let people cross, try to stop them at the border, but then leave them alone if they successfully circumvent the police state at the border, like make it to Los Angeles, then where are you? I mean, all people have to do is say, man, I just got to get past that immigration police state on the border and I'm home free. Well, no, because the immigration enforcement is you cannot come in here illegally, and if you do come in here illegally, we're going to return you regardless of where we find you. Otherwise it would provide a really weird incentive for people to come over. So that's why this deportation and all this grabbing of people and the masked agents of grabbing people off the street and essentially kidnapping them and whisking them away and sending them to foreign countries like El Salvador to a terrorism confinement center where they're tortured and beaten. And that's all part and parcel of this immigration control system that leftists believe in. They support. They just have this notion that if only it would be handled nicely, politely, benignly. It's not possible. In order to win this war, to make the system work, you need not just a borderlands police state, you need a nationwide police state. Okay. That's Trump Watch for this week. Thank you all very much for tuning in, and thanks for your great support of the Future of Freedom Foundation.